I want to just basically say it's nuanced how all this happened. But the point, I think, is actually still very valid, is they did all exit stage left. And for them to exit stage left as the company was becoming more and more successful is a bit unusual. Okay, here we go, guys.
When OpenAI launched ChatGPT in 2022, it became the fastest consumer adoption of any technology in recorded human history. Sam Altman became the prophet of a new civilization. He sat before the United States Senate and told lawmakers that what his company was building might be the most transformative and dangerous technology humanity had ever created, but it might all be an illusion. Not the technology. The technology is real. What may be illusory is the idea that OpenAI, as an independent company, can survive long enough to profit from it. Because when you pull back...
Now, yeah, let's already get in here. Just Cyber, what's going on, buddy? Good to have you, brother. So let's kind of start by looking at this from a purely scientific perspective, right? Kind of the way that this is the way that I kind of think about some of these things when I'm hearing people give strong opinions, no doubt, strong opinions about things, is the first thing I try to understand is I try to understand their domain expertise. And I don't mean like all pedigree snob. I don't mean that if they don't have a PhD in machine learning, they aren't allowed to form an opinion. You get experience in these things a variety of ways. But what I generally want to see is there's some body of evidence showing me that the person that's making a claim has at least foundational knowledge of the field they're making claims in. And I think as we all look at Sam Altman's background, there's a couple things that we notice immediately, and these are more just facts, right? So no opinion here. We're just going to look at the data. So, as I recall, he went to Stanford, and that's only painful because I think many of you know where I teach, and it's hard to fight the good fight when stuff like this is going on. Anyway, so he went to Stanford, undergrad, computer science, as I understand it. And then he dropped out after some period of time. So he never finished his bachelor's degree in computer science. So because he doesn't even have a bachelor's degree in computer science, again, not saying that you need to have a bachelor's. If you're in industry and you're cranking and you're a tinkerer or you are doing a variety of things, advancing your knowledge through craftsmanship, like actually building, that's totally fine. Some of the best and smartest people I know in computer science, programmers, AI people, they're not formally trained. They learned on their own, which I think is fantastic. But if you follow the paper trail, what I generally see from Altman is a body of evidence that demonstrates he's very keen on things related to money, and no judgment, right? Like, different path for me, but if that's what he wants to focus on, that's what he wants to focus on. But there's very little in that body of evidence that demonstrates a deep understanding of artificial intelligence. Therefore, if that lacks, why would we care what he thinks? Like, if he's not an expert in the field, how would his opinion make us any more informed? I mean, at least for my simple mind, this is kind of the way that it works for me, is I would want, for example, when we go to the hospital, we usually have a medical doctor examine us and tell us all the stuff because they're a trusted expert in that domain. So when Altman is coming in saying that this is the most revolutionary technology and it can destroy the planet or whatever, I don't know that I care at all what he has to say, because I don't know how he can substantiate any of those claims without the knowledge of the field. Now, that doesn't mean that other people who are highly informed, like Jan LeCun or Ilya or Jeff Hinton or so on and so forth, can't come to the same conclusions and share those, but it's different, right? Because one of those conclusions is founded in knowledge, and the other is just a person saying random stuff. They're just talking for who knows why, probably to make a spectacle, right? Because really audacious claims about how this thing could either save the planet or destroy the planet, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of hyperbole. It's pretty spectacular, and so people are going to probably sit up in their chairs. Anyway, so I want to start there because yeah, exactly. It tends to be what I see as well every day, is that the people who often are the most calm and that can talk about these things rationally without a bunch of hyperbole are oftentimes the people that are the wisest, that actually know what they're talking about, because they don't need to resort to yelling or screaming or making a fuss. They can just overwhelm you with actual data, and then through that data, you can make your own decisions. All right, back to it.
Back the curtain, what you find is a company in the grip of a slow-motion crisis. The question was never whether AI would change the world. It probably will. The question is whether OpenAI will still exist when that happens. Let's start with the funding, because the headlines are deeply misleading. Microsoft has poured tens of billions into OpenAI. In March of 2025 alone, Sam Altman raised $40 billion, which is the largest private funding round in human history. So OpenAI must be flush with cash, right? Not exactly. For example, a significant portion of Microsoft's investment doesn't arrive as actual currency. It arrives as Azure Cloud credits, essentially a corporate gift card that can only be spent on Microsoft's own servers. OpenAI records these as
Cloud
capital
credits.
raised. Microsoft records the spending as cloud revenue.
Cool. So let's pause there. Now, the next time you read about some AI company that is raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and it just so happens that they're partnering with Google or Nvidia or Microsoft or somebody else that has massive cloud infrastructure, you can almost guarantee that a very large portion of the money that they're getting is not actually money. It is cloud credits that they're going to use to get access to GPUs and other things. And they do these types of deals for two reasons, minimally two reasons. The first is, one, it's helpful for AI companies that can only do things through language models, right? There's a million ways to do artificial intelligence. You don't have to just do it through language models, but it's easy. It's very easy. You don't have to spend decades actually learning the field. And that's not a diss on language models. They're very pervasive and they have a lot of efficacy. But if you want to do anything with language models of some reasonable size, you're probably going to need some reasonable amount of GPUs. So the first thing is, it's beneficial for the AI company that is doing the raise, is they're getting access to these GPUs, which in today's world, this can be even harder with a limited supply of hardware. The second is it can make the AI company look really impressive. They raised $100 million. What you, the average person that's just reading the news, may not know is 80% of that may be in cloud credits. No joke. Like I've heard of some ridiculous numbers where it's upwards of 80 to 90% of credits just for cloud, and only 10% is actual capital. I don't know what the case is here, but that's the first piece. The second piece is the cloud provider then gets revenue, or that they can claim as revenue for their cloud. So it's a very interesting form of, I don't want to say manipulation on what's going on, but it's not super great, because it's not nearly as transparent as we might believe it is. It's not, this company is getting $100 million in capital, and then when you hear about the quarterly reports from Microsoft and they announce that their cloud usage or the cloud revenue has 10x'd, but they don't disclose that 9x of that was in AI companies that they're funding to basically get them vendor locked in their cloud, and that's where it's coming from. These details are often left out, right? So this is again, is part of the reason why I really wanted to do GTT, is I just got tired of people misrepresenting the truth and the majority of the public not really understanding all the games that are happening and just reading these sensational headlines. Okay, back to these guys.
On paper, both sides grow. In practice, much of the money never leaves the ecosystem. It's a financial loop. And we have seen loops like this before. During the late 1990s dot-com bubble, startups routinely bought advertising from one another and booked it as revenue, creating the appearance of explosive growth while the same dollars simply circulated between balance sheets. When the spending slowed, the revenue evaporated. In the early 2000s, companies like Enron used so-called round-trip trades, buying and selling assets back and forth, to inflate reported activity without generating real economic value. And more recently, WeWork raised billions at ever higher valuations, supported by internal financial engineering that looked sustainable right up until external capital tightened. The pattern is always the same. As long as new capital flows in, the structure holds. The moment it slows, the underlying economics are exposed. The real problem with OpenAI's setup is simpler and more dangerous than any of those historical precedents. You cannot pay a researcher's $2 million annual salary with cloud credits. You cannot cover legal fees or office rent with digital coupons. So OpenAI is constantly, desperately scrambling for actual cash from outside investors just to make payroll each quarter. Every fiscal quarter is a race. And races eventually have a finish line, and those investors have to wonder, when does this end? Because the losses are staggering. OpenAI burned through $8 billion in 2025. Internal projections show that figure climbing to $14 billion in 2026 and $40 billion by 2028. Microsoft's
Yikes.
own filings suggest the company lost roughly $12 billion in a single quarter. By one set of projections, cumulative losses will hit $143 billion before profitability arrives. No startup in...
So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. And again, to be fair, when you're trying to do something of massive scale, oftentimes, the saying goes, you need money to make money. And so I'm not necessarily knocking that, but this is a very large investment predicated on something that is not fully substantiated to have the type of market impact that it's speculated to have. And while we are seeing it, especially for us on GTT, we are seeing that it has impact on things like AI coding, and then musicians are seeing it, artists are seeing it, and as a chatbot, they function, I think, in the early signals, I think, are compelling for sure. I do think that there is a point of diminishing returns, and I don't know that any of us know exactly where that clipping point is, but it's probably there. Again, part of the reason for diff is to help get it beyond that peak that you might see. Anyway, the point is that as you start going down this path, and there's this greenfield promise, this evergreen promise of it's going to transform everything, but you don't necessarily have all the data that demonstrates this, it becomes kind of a scary proposition. One of the challenges, though, is I think for many people that are already invested is in for a penny, in for a pound kind of thing, right? So if they back out now, and you may notice that some of them are actually kind of backing out or changing their direction. For example, the relationship that Microsoft has with OpenAI is very complex now. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what that relationship is, but if you look at the news, I think this is out there, and you search on Microsoft and the AI models that they're using, back in 2022, what I think you'd see is Microsoft basically would only use OpenAI models. It's just all Codex or whatever. But today, I think that story may be changing. And if that story is changing, one has to ask some really fundamental questions. Because if Microsoft invested hundreds of millions of dollars into this company, why on earth would they consider using other people's models unless there's something fundamentally wrong, right? Because it's not just the fact that these models may have less value. There's an optics part of this. There's a perception that they're very aware of, that the public will get the moment that Microsoft announces, oh, and by the way, we're working with company X over here for our models. A lot of smart people are going to start asking these fundamental questions of, wait a second, I thought that they were in bed with OpenAI. And so if they're now considering other people's stuff, this sounds like that marriage is not one made in heaven. Anyway, things for us to muse about.
Human history has ever bled this much money. To understand why the costs are this catastrophic, you need to understand what's called the scaling laws, the foundational idea that has driven the entire AI boom.
This
Make
is
a model
critically
bigger,
important.
train it on more data, and it gets smarter. For years, the pattern held without exception. Every new generation defied the skeptics. The curve only went up, and everyone assumed it always would. But there's a catch buried in the mathematics that somehow got lost in the hype. Every doubling of intelligence requires roughly 5 times more compute, 5 times more energy, and 5 times more infrastructure. The curve goes up. The cost curve goes up faster. Sam Altman himself has said that training runs for GPT.
So hold on, let's think about this, guys. So you're getting more performance. Remember how we've talked about Dennard scaling and how that's the real blocker here? That all of this other stuff, but the moment Dennard scaling ends and you no longer are getting improved performance for the same power draw, you've got some issues. Now, anything that's done in a parallel way or in a distributed way cannot, based on pure mathematics, it cannot scientifically maintain a linear rate of growth on performance with respect to its overheads. So what I mean is that you can't expect that if you increase the compute usage by 10%, that you'll get an efficiency improvement by 10%. And the reason why this is like a fundamental law of anything related to parallel and distributed systems is minimally you're going to have communication overhead. When it's done on a single node, you have the bus, but you don't have this external back and forth between nodes. So even if it's completely parallel, what's known as embarrassingly parallel, you will still have the communication overhead as you're sharing the information between the nodes. So you'll immediately have that. In reality, there's oftentimes serialization between these nodes, which will slow things down. And if you look at things like Amdahl's law, you'll see that any small amount of serialization eventually becomes the bottleneck, right? On top of that, as you're trying to do like distributed inference or distributed learning, it's not just the communication to go back to the thing that is asking the question and giving the answer. It's getting the data to the distributed network. And depending on the size of that data and the amount of information, what ends up happening is your new bottleneck, even if you assume that the compute would be the same, so you have two nodes that are going to be able to function with the same amount of performance as if it's done on a single node, which is not true, because once the data is there, you have to do things like load it in the cache, move it from main memory to L3, L2, L1 registers. This all takes time. So that's additional work that's happening on each of these nodes. And it's communication and compute overhead that you don't have if it's done on a single node. And finally, I think the maybe one of the most important things to keep in mind is that because language models generally function with the highest degree of efficacy using SIMD operations, single instruction, multiple data, they're going to need to utilize the GPUs. The problem, though, is to get information from a general purpose computer to a GPU requires even more communication overhead, is that you generally need to prep the data in a certain way so you can get it into the kernel and the memory that the GPU is going to act on, and then transfer it again before it can leave the thing. So the point is that when you go back to what you're saying about this 5x overhead for any type of like linear improvement, this now exacerbates the cost overhead. This is something that I've been trying to tease out for some time, right? Is they're so upside down, and it just becomes more exacerbated the bigger the language models get, for all the reasons that we're talking about. Now, again, if Dennard scaling were holding, then this might not be as big of a problem. But it is actually a real problem. And you run into all of these other issues related to not just the data itself, but also the models, right? As they get distributed and there's updates. And so I've mentioned this many times that one of the core things we need to be thinking about is not just what the revenue is of these AI companies, because that's only half the story. If their cost is increasingly getting worse and the curves are not lining up, given the stalling of Dennard scaling, and the lack of optimizations that you can do for neural networks. Like, there's only so many things we can do, like LoRa or Dropout, that it raises some fundamental questions about, is this even the right approach? Which is why I'm so keen on things like deterministic intent folding, diff, or small language models, right? They're just like a fundamental departure from the way that some of these earlier systems have worked. And I do think that this is partially why Anthropic is having such major wins, is I think that they've made somewhat similar observations and use like an ensemble network, and it creates less overhead. You have more specialized things, and the distribution of work becomes minimized, right? And keep in mind, like, my whole doctorate was really focused on parallel computing. And one of the first things I found out in doing research and building parallel computing systems is don't do it. Unless you absolutely need to get this performance and you have really elegant ways that you can scale these algorithms. If that's not possible, yeah, you're going to be in trouble. So these are all factors. And yeah, one additional factor that I think is critical is, as we know, we're in sort of a silicon shortage right now. And so if the language models are principally bound to only executing on GPUs, and we can't churn out the GPUs fast enough, does it even matter, right? Again, another reason why we need something like diff that can function on commodity CPUs, not on GPUs, right? So there's like, when you start to look at this from an expert perspective that can walk through all of the technical limitations, it raises some major concerns of like, this is not going to work, guys. Not the way it's currently being done, right? And that, I want to be clear, I'm sold on language models. I think language models have incredible value. The thing I'm not sold on are large cloud-based language models that need 10,000 nodes to do anything meaningful. Okay, back to these guys.
E5 scale models exceeds $1 billion each, and that's before factoring in salaries, office space, or legal bills. The hardware compounds it further. Nvidia's latest Blackwell chips, each costing tens of thousands of dollars, are what OpenAI depends on to stay competitive, and when the next generation of chips arrives, the previous fleet becomes a liability. Imagine scrapping your entire truck fleet every 18 months just to stay in the race. And then there's water, the resource nobody mentions when they talk about AI. Researchers at Purdue University estimate that the simple conversation with ChatGPT, just 10 to 50 questions, consumes around 500 milliliters of water. Data centers in Texas alone consumed an estimated 46 billion gallons in 2025, a figure projected to reach nearly 400 billion gallons by 2030. All of this, the electricity, the water, the chips, to run a product that, at the free tier, loses money on every single interaction. You can learn a lot about a company from who chooses to walk away. OpenAI was founded in 2015 by 11 people, 11 individuals who believed collectively that they could build artificial general intelligence safely and for the benefit of humanity. Today, only 2 of those 11 original founders remain actively working at the company: Sam Altman and researcher Wojciech Zaremba. Everyone else is gone. Ilya Sutskever, perhaps the most important AI researcher of his generation, departed in May 2024 and launched his own company focused purely on safe AI development. John Schulman, who built much of the research infrastructure underpinning ChatGPT, left for Anthropic. Greg Brockman, co-founder and president, took an extended leave and never fully returned. Mira Murati, chief technology officer, gone. Bob McGrew, chief research officer, gone. And Jan Lake, who led OpenAI's entire AI safety team, resigned and went straight to Anthropic Several of these departures pointed to the same source, the leadership environment under Sam Altman. According to reporting from The Atlantic, Mira Murati herself said, "I don't feel comfortable about Sam leading us to AGI." Ilya Sutskever.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack here, but I want to... Where did he show this? Okay. So, I want to give my real take on this. First of all, creating a startup and working with people that are going to, commit their life to something and do 80-hour work weeks in perpetuity for years at a time is a really hard thing to do. It's really challenging to find people that are going to be like that dedicated for that long. It's very common in the Valley and elsewhere for founders to leave, and for them to leave at a much more rapid clip than being at OpenAI for 10 years. So I just want to be fair here, is most companies have departures like this that are happening at an even faster clip. But to counterbalance this, I think what makes this different-ish is oftentimes the reason why the founders are leaving is because the company is not being successful. The vision is not working out, they're not getting traction, they can't find investors. And so this is a lot of the reason why the co-founders will exit stage left, because they kind of just don't see a future in the company. Or in, certain cases, they've never been co-founders, and so they didn't know what they were getting into. I mean, I can say from my own experience, founding 2-3 companies, it's a lot of work, right? And it takes a special kind of person that's a little, has no off switch and is willing to make sacrifices on almost every aspect of their life to do it. What's curious, though, about the OpenAI situation is that these people were leaving when OpenAI was becoming successful, when it was starting to do really, really well, that many of them stayed and were locked in, I think, when it was about the mission. And it wasn't until they started to get like huge amount of funding, and I think the narrative became so disconnected from reality about solving AGI, which, by the way, as we've discussed many times, AGI is, at least from my perspective, it's complete nonsense, right? I don't know why we keep talking about it. It doesn't make any sense. No one even knows how to define it. And so nobody's going to get to AGI, right? Like you gotta, before you can add numbers together, you have to first understand what addition is, right? So we need to start with step one. Anyway, what you saw though is once OpenAI started to get into a position where they had a lot of investors, the way this works, right, is that there's a lot of investors are looking for the hype signal, and they can see that OpenAI is doing well. And so more likely than not, people are trying to poach them from the company, saying, you should actually just do your own company and we can do it together. We'll fund you and do all these things. In many cases, though, if it's a very strong team and it's really strong leadership, I think that the folks will stick around. But in this case, I think this is part of the reason why there was a big exit of stage left, is we could see that the leadership is somewhat dubious. And you don't need me to say this. Like, all you need to do is just Google Sam Altman and you'll see all kinds of things about his behavior and how nobody knows who he is because he's like a chameleon. He changes around whoever he is just to do sort of like this psychological brainwashing and make it seem like he's everybody's friend. And it's not super great. I want to just basically say it's nuanced how all this happened, but the point I think is actually still very valid. Is they did all exit stage left, and for them to exit stage left as the company was becoming more and more successful is a bit unusual.
Anthropic. Several of these departures pointed to the same source, the leadership environment under Sam Altman. According to reporting from The Atlantic, Mira Murati herself said, "I don't feel comfortable about Sam leading us to AGI." Ilya Sutskever reportedly told the board, "I don't think Sam is the guy who should have the finger on the button for AGI." Sutskever provided the board with a self-destructing PDF containing Slack screenshots documenting dozens of examples of what he described as lying or other toxic behaviour. This was not disgruntled employees venting. This was the chief technology officer and the chief scientist of the most important AI company in the world, telling the board that they did not trust their CEO with the technology he was building. The board fired him. He was reinstated days later after a staff revolt, and then the board that fired him was overhauled entirely, replaced with names more aligned with Altman's commercial vision. The pattern didn't stop there. When OpenAI's restrictive non-disparagement agreements became public, contracts that threatened to strip departing employees of their vested equity for any criticism of the company, Altman publicly apologized and claimed.
Also, keep in mind what's even more kind of hilarious about all of this is this company is supposed to be not for profit. So if it's not for profit, why do people even really care about equity? Isn't the whole point of not for profit that you're principally there for the mission? Right? Like you're there to do, like for example, if people work at the Red Cross, do you think they're sitting around counting the shares that they have vested? Or do you think that they're thinking about, I want to impact more people's lives in a positive way? So this is a very confusing kind of sea of webs, I think, that gets us to wherever we are with this story. It also raises, I think, some... Well, I better not say that. Okay. I don't want to get into too much trouble.
Ignorance of the policy, but Vox obtained incorporation documents from April 2023 bearing Altman's signature that explicitly authorized those very provisions. His stated positions on AI regulation have also shifted dramatically, while publicly advocating for government oversight. In his 2023 Senate testimony, OpenAI was simultaneously lobbying behind the scenes to weaken the EU AI Act. By 2025, Altman had completely reversed course, warning that regulation could be disastrous. There is a consistent thread running through all of it. Not incompetence, not bad luck. A persistent gap between what is said publicly and what is actually happening.
Yeah.
There's a term in investing called an economic moat, meaning the durable competitive advantage that protects a business long after the initial innovation fades. Coca-Cola's moat is its brand. Salesforce's moat is how painful it is to migrate your corporate data away. Netflix built its moat with exclusive content you simply cannot watch anywhere else. OpenAI has none of that, and on December 1st, 2025, the proof arrived in the form of an internal...
Like 100%, right? This is part of the reason why, at least from a scientist perspective, compositional novelty is not likely to get you to become Google. Because if you can do compositional novelty, so can other people. What compositional novelty is that you basically are looking at all the things that exist and you're finding clever ways to put them together, right? And so everybody can do this. In fact, if you think about things like GitHub or GitLabs or Bitbucket, you saw this, right? Is everybody had access to Git, and so no one necessarily has an advantage. The reason why I think GitHub came out as the winner is the economic advantage that they had was market control, right? They were able to get in first. They're able to get a huge number of users, and they made it really easy to kind of get in with GitHub and maybe not so easy to get out, right? So yeah, I think that you can kind of get what I'm saying. On top of the market adoption, there are other things that make other companies stand out, that make them fundamentally disruptive from a technical perspective. Microsoft, for example, has Windows. And again, Windows, a big thing that made Windows kind of stand out is they had all the companies working with them. So you had applications on their operating system. This is one of the main reasons why I think Windows continues to do so well, is in many people's technical minds, the Mac operating system is superior to Windows because it's based off of an OpenBSD kernel. Like now, thank goodness. Prior to OS X, it wasn't. It was an unprotected memory model, had all kinds of problems. But they made the intelligent decision to migrate and put it on basically a Nix type of operating system. So and similar with Linux, these two operating systems have technically, they're technically and functionally more robust than Windows is. So why does Windows still exist? Well, a lot of it has to do with control of the market and partnerships that they built up. So you can have things that are technically superior, but they still don't get adoption for a variety of reasons. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there's many different ways of doing this, but OpenAI doesn't have those things, right? OpenAI hasn't been around for 20 years where they have these exclusive partnerships. They're trying to do this now, right? Because they realize that they have no technical moat because everybody has transformers. And this does also, just as a curious aside, it puts Merle in a very precarious situation because we have diff and we're the only ones that have diff right now. And there are a lot of people that want diff, and they don't just want it for themselves. They want it so no one else has it. And we're being very careful about navigating this space. I want to be honest. It wasn't, when we were inventing diff, it wasn't, I didn't think that it would go this way. It's not like I was anticipating that diff would be the thing that would level up all language models, and suddenly all the language model vendors would be beating down the door saying, we want it, but only if we get exclusive access. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? But that's not why I was inventing it. Like, that wasn't what I was aiming for. I was like, it's just not going to work solely with these neural network things because of their stochasticity. We need something that's going to be able to support iterative refinement and be debuggable, interpretable, and all this stuff. So we need something new, which is why we spent the last 4 years inventing this new technology. And so now we're in the spot that he's just talking about. We have this technical moat that is, I mean, it's kind of like on one hand, it's a really awesome position to be in. But again, just full disclosure, it's also a terrible situation to be in, because no matter what we do, or more specifically, what I decide to do, I'm gonna piss a lot of people off. I'm gonna make a ton of enemies no matter how I go about it, which I don't really mind. I have a lot of detractors. You know, that's been the story of my life, but it wasn't intended to be this this crazy. Literally every conversation we have now is It's no longer a question about, wow, does this work? This looks interesting, but I don't buy it. The question immediately becomes, okay, cool. How do we get exclusive access to this? And will you let us acquire you? It's like, those are the two questions. Either we create a development partnership and we want exclusive access to it, or we want to buy you. And I don't really want either of those outcomes. I'd like to do something else. But anyway, I guess it's this is like a first world problem. So I'm not trying to be the victim here, or I know there's far worse situations to be in. Anyway.
Internal memo. Sam Altman sent a message to his entire company declaring a code red. The trigger was specific. Google's Gemini 3 had just passed GPT 5.1 on key benchmarks. Altman privately told employees that Gemini 3 could create economic headwinds for OpenAI. Other initiatives were to be shelved immediately. Shopping agents delayed. Health features delayed. The personalized assistant project called Pulse delayed. Even the advertising plans OpenAI had been quietly developing were pushed aside. Every available engineer was redirected to shore up the flagship product. Gemini surpassed 650 million monthly active users. OpenAI's own traffic dipped month.
And this goes back to, I think, what I was saying in maybe the last stream, is the way that I'm kind of thinking about the bets that I'm going to make on has more to do with body of evidence than any kind of flash in the pan. Is Google is a powerhouse. They have a bunch of really smart people. They have almost an unbounded amount of capital. And so if they set their minds to something, it's going to be pretty hard to beat them, especially when the technology is open. I think maybe the only way to beat a $1 trillion titan is if you somehow have something fundamentally disruptive that they don't have, right? That's kind of like the only viable way, at least from my perspective. And just as a refresher, Google invented transformers, which are the basis of language models, which are the basis of large language models. So if they're the ones that invented it, do you think maybe they might understand it better than anybody else? Especially other people that are just like using it? I mean, that would be my take. That would be my first intuition. So trying to think that you could beat somebody else on a thing that like they invented, that they understand all of these nuances that probably the general public has no awareness of, is a pretty bold thing. That being said, I do want to give OpenAI credit because they did, I think, realize the power of transformers. I think many of us did, right, when they really kind of came out in 2018. But I think OpenAI, to their credit, were the first ones that really pushed it at scale. Aside from Google Translate. Like Google Translate did come out, and it was principally the core usage, at least to my understanding, of transformers at Google, because supporting multiple languages, natural languages, is very good for their business model, given the ad revenue that they make, right? So from their perspective, it was absolutely the right way to use it. OpenAI doesn't have a huge advertising model, so they're like, we can do something that no one else has done, which is like chat, or a thing that is gonna work on a problem that no one is really focusing on, that people might care about, people might be interested in. They didn't try to beat Google with transformers in an advertising model. That's very smart, right? They probably never would have gotten this big. Instead, they try to pivot it and focus on something else. The other piece that I think is really critical to keep in mind is the whole time they were partnered with Microsoft. And a big reason why Microsoft partnered with OpenAI, there's at least two major reasons. The first is OpenAI was positioned with Microsoft to kill Google. That was their goal, is like, we can do this stuff. And it's absolutely not easy to take on the giants. Right, absolutely. Like, even if, and they will fall behind, right? They absolutely will fall behind, because it takes a lot more work for them to correct the ship. But once they correct the ship, you better be like so far ahead or have something that, like, for example, if it's a boat race, you may be able to get in front because you can take a left turn faster than their enormous boat. But once they get straightened out, if you're still on water, they're probably going to school you. That's why, like with Merly, our goal was never to compete with the Titans. We're not going to play their game. We're going to play our game. We're going to invent new technology that nobody else has and then show that it has tremendous value. And now we're flying an airplane while everyone else is on the water. That's how you win, right? Is you don't you don't play flag football and then think that you can take on like the NFL players. It's not going to work. Instead, you say, look, we're going to play chess and get them to come play chess. And maybe they're not as good playing chess as they are football, right? You change the game fundamentally. Anyway, so going back to the Microsoft OpenAI example, is Microsoft saw that there's this huge, 100% every day is the local model. Again, some of you may recall one of the main things I've been leaning into are small language models for forever. And local models are small language models. Like we actually even renamed SLMs. So instead of it meaning small language model, it means single node language model. The S stands for single node now. And it's the idea that once it's a single node, you elide away all of the overheads that I was talking about for these parallel or distributed problems. You don't have the communication overhead. You don't have the memory movement overhead. Your functional units are executing at the clock speed of the actual processor. It's not degraded by moving things in and out of memory, so on and so forth. But in order to do that, you likely need a couple things. You need the model to be small enough to where it can reside on a single node. On top of that, because the GPUs are going to be significantly more limited in their power, you probably need optimizations that will work on a miniaturized GPU, or you don't use a GPU, you use something like a neuromorphic processor, or you use FPGAs, field programmable gate arrays, or CGRAs, coarse grain resource allocators. Either of those two things. And if you look at the most recent spec of the latest iPhones, what I believe you will see is that they have a built-in FPGA on their devices now. I wonder what those FPGAs are doing. You think maybe it's so they can be programmed specifically to work with various local models and be reconstructed based on the domain that the language model is like working in? I mean, I don't know, but I know there's a lot of smart people at Apple, and yeah. Anyway, 100% guys. I think we're all getting to the point of this. There was one other reason why Microsoft could play this game, and you'll actually see this with a lot of big techs and startups, is when you have a really strong partnership with a startup and the startup is working in the space that like they're driving but you're not, it allows them to make mistakes and have errors in judgment and just basically screw up in the way that the big tech company cannot. So for example, if OpenAI is to completely fail, Microsoft can basically say, wasn't us. You know, we just invested in them. We thought they were great, but you know, they were wrong, and yep, that's why we never really adopted their stuff or whatever. It insulates them. And so, on the other hand, if OpenAI wins, Microsoft can say, oh, yeah, well, we knew it the whole time, right? It's a very clever way of the big tech company being able to have their cake and eat it too. Now, you can get into some murky waters if the startup company decides to get a bit like wild and Riley. But if you own 49% of that company and you essentially have controlling interest of that corporation, then they can't get Riley on you. So if you go back to the last round of funding, I think with OpenAI and Microsoft, a big thing that emerged from it is Microsoft took 49%. That's enough, right? The only universe where that wouldn't be enough is that if a single individual or entity owned more than 49%. And I can tell you right now, Sam Altman does not own 50% of, like, even the most prominent founders that are really driving the companies, people like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, after dilution, the most that many of them will hold is like 30% of the company. I think if you Google Jeff Bezos and his ownership, like I can't remember exactly. I thought the number was between 10 and 20%, something like that. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's not above 30%. And it's his company, right? So the point is that when you have an entity like Microsoft that does this massive fundraising round and they take 49% of the share, you can pretty sure that basically Microsoft controls that whole thing. And they will let OpenAI do stuff up to a point. When it gets a little bit too far, then the real titan here, the company that is making hundreds of billions of dollars a year in revenue, which is Microsoft, at some point, if that ship of OpenAI gets too far off the beaten path, Satya Nadella is not dumb. I guess we'll leave it at that. Okay.
Over month, twice in 2025. And there's an uncomfortable irony at the heart of all this. Google's fundamental advantage isn't just better models, it's that Google can deploy its AI instantly across billions of existing touchpoints, YouTube, Search, Workspace, Android, while funding its entire AI build-out through its existing highly profitable advertising business. OpenAI has no...
Just as an aside, I saw a couple things. So first, Android has controlling interest in the mobile space, to the best of my knowledge. We can look this up. And by the way, that's a really interesting one. That there was a period of time, if you roll the clock back, BlackBerry at some point had the controlling interest. Then Apple took it from BlackBerry. But again, Apple, because Apple is like, we want to own the whole ecosystem. Everything is Apple. It allowed Google to come in and create a more open market where you don't have to buy a Pixel phone to use Android, right? And keep in mind, this was a very intentional choice by Apple, because Apple they want to have the whole vertical. You got to use their hardware, you got to use their app store, you got to use their software, you got to use their operating system. It's all Apple. And for consumers, like the average consumer, that may not be so bad. But for other businesses, this is like really not great, right? It's a monopoly. I don't know how else to say it. It's really bordering on questions of being legal, to my knowledge. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer, so what do I know? But I have worked with lots of lawyers. Anyway, so Google comes in and Google says, look, we just are going to control Android and the App Store. But everybody else and everything else, we don't care. You can build the phone. We'll work with whatever phone manufacturer. Oh, you want to be on something that's not AT&T? We don't care. right? Remember that whole lock-in period when Apple was like the only network provider we'll use is AT&T. And so if you had Sprint or Verizon or anything else, it's like, can't get an iPhone. I mean, that's changed now, but like this is the kind of just wacky lock-in stuff that Apple was doing. Anyway, so going back to Google's position on being able to dominate with the AI stuff, first, they have search, right? Maybe there's other search engines that people are using more than Google today, but I don't know what they are. It's not Yahoo. It's not Bing, right? So you've got that, and that's a huge amount of users every day that you can immediately transfer their search, their web search, to your AI. And in some ways, guys, I'm going to be totally honest, this is kind of how Google got me to convert over to Gemini, is that I was doing the searches and then Gemini kept like volunteering stuff. And as Gemini was getting better and better, I was like, Gemini is starting to really, it doesn't just answer the question, it gets at what my intention is. And so now in a lot of cases, I don't even bring up Google search, I bring up Gemini. And then I say, Gemini, figure this out. And then Gemini, we have like, if it's a more complex thing, if it's not just like, give me the address of this restaurant, it's instead like, I want to know about this company. For example, let's kind of rabbit hole a little bit. As you guys probably know, at this point, there are hundreds of companies, no exaggeration, hundreds of companies that want to be sponsors for GTT. That's cool. I mean, that's very, we should be flattered, right? That there's so many people that want to give us money so we can support the channel. But I think, as you guys know, I'm really particular about who our bedmates are, because one of the things that matters the most to me is trust. And I know that there's a lot of companies, especially in the world of AI, they're scamming. I mean, it could be, we're looking at one right now, right? And so I'm not going to work with those people. But put yourself into my shoes for a second and imagine that you're getting sponsorship requests from different companies that come in. Let's say it's 5 a day. 5 a day. So that's, say, 35 per week, because they're coming in all days. How do I do a deep analysis of 35 companies a week and have that not be my full-time job? I don't. And how do you handle this from a web search thing? Like, here's the company, I've never heard of them before. Okay, drop it into Google search. Okay, it just gives me the website. What about their origin point? What about who they're partnered with? What about reviews for their product? And keep in mind, a lot of these companies, they're startups, and so they don't have like a Wikipedia page. I can't go to Wikipedia and say, give me all the details. So instead, what I do is I basically take the email and I say, Gemini, do what we've discussed. And so Gemini at this point knows, it has rules that I programmed into it to do the various things that I need for analysis. Like, I need to know what they've been funded. I need to know about their founding team. I need to know what the feedback has been for their product. I need to know who their investors are. I specifically need to know what country they is their origin, right? Because there's and there are a lot of wacky companies that they're really based in a country that is going to raise way too many concerns for me, but they have a shell company that they do business through, which is the company that comes to me, but their actual origin point is like not a country that I want to work with, because it's going to get, there would be too many questions. So anyway, now you've got Google search. That's going to get a huge amount of people that you can send right to the AI. That's a massive competitive advantage. Next, you have YouTube, right? I don't know if you guys know this, but YouTube, to the best of my knowledge, YouTube now has more users than I think. The number's insane. It's something like, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it's something like they have more users than all of the classical television stations have combined. So NBC, ABC, Fox, all of those folks, you add all of them up together, YouTube's more. Which is why you're starting to see, I think, everybody shift to YouTube. Is that YouTube, YouTube TV has basically like everybody. Why does YouTube have HBO there, right? Because there used to be like the HBO Max. I mean, maybe that still exists, but I just do it through YouTube now. Anyway, so that's the next vehicle that they can push their AI models, is people can be on YouTube. And then think about this from an advertising perspective, right? Because a big part of the money that they're going to make from just like a corporate venture perspective is through advertising. How do the AI models help with YouTube? Attention to the videos and what they're watching and the ads that they inject into the videos, right? So now you have a second massive stream of users that you can use the AI models that will level them up, and then you make more business. The third is Android. Android being the market leader on the phones. I have multiple phones. I was at one point using the iPhone, but it just got so annoying because I can't sideload things, and it's too I'm too much of a power user, and I just can't hack it the way that I need to hack it to make it do like crazy stuff. Now that's probably a problem that's more specific to GTTers, right? Like I suspect that other people that are more just the average user. I know a lot of people love how easy iOS is to use. So not like a knock on Apple. I think they do really well, I think, with UI and UX. I think in the past, they've set the precedents for that type of thing. I also want to share that I do think that OpenAI has done, at least historically, really well with UI and UX. Is when ChatGPT first came out, I think part of the appeal, it was just like a gorgeous, beautiful kind of experience. It wasn't like MySpace, where it wasn't like some of my professor friends' web pages, including mine, right? It was just, it felt very polished and just kind of, I think you kind of feel like you're getting these dopamine hits of just using it, being like, wow, I love using this thing. Anyway, so going back to the democratization of these AIs across the world, I think this puts Google in a very strong position because of those three things. Minimally, Google search, which is going to get them to funnel and train and get all these people using their model. YouTube, which is friggin' ginormous at this point, and then Android. There's probably others that I'm missing, but minimally, I think those three. Again, if you're a startup and you're going to try to go head to head with the Titan, you better have something really special. Otherwise, I mean, it may be flashy in the moment, but again, as my students were asking, what AI company should I, which one should I be using their models for? And without even thinking about it, I'm like, well, a very safe bet is Google, simply because of their just dominance. Anyway.
No such safety net. No existing business generating cash while the AI division burns through it. No distribution network built over decades. No fallback. Their users are, by every measure, completely mercenary. No switching costs. No proprietary data that traps you. no network effect that deepens the longer you stay. If a competitor offers a comparable...
Now this is part of the narrative that's not. I don't agree with this. And part of the reason why I don't agree with this is a big reason why they partnered with Microsoft is Microsoft does have these things, right? This is the whole Copilot system. Microsoft has huge reach with Windows. They have huge reach with Azure, and they have some reach with other things, right? Like I don't know how many users they have with Bing, but the Office suite itself, like Office 365 or whatever, that's massive reach as well. And so yes, OpenAI as its own entity without a very strong strategic partner, they're kind of cooked. But again, while I think a lot of things about Sam Altman, I don't think that Sam's dumb, right? I think he's a highly intelligent person. And so building this very strong partner, this strategic partnership with Microsoft to give him and OpenAI a lot of those access points was not an accident, right? It was like, for example, part of the reason why we partnered with IBM. Did we not have Microsoft and Google and others knocking on our door? So why did we pick IBM of all the companies? I think one of the things that's probably very obvious is IBM is massively pro open source. Just look at Red Hat Linux and then all the stuff that they're doing. The second is, could they use help in becoming a leader in AI? Right? Like, does the relationship with IBM potentially, is it stronger and more useful to have a company like Merle working with them, or does Google need us more? Right? So these are all various factors that founders are considering when they're setting up, intelligent founders, right, are considering when they're trying to understand strategic partnerships. And so everything that he's saying is right, I think, about what OpenAI would need to be able to compete with Google. But some of that was covered with the relationship with Microsoft. And I don't think that was just a coincidence. I think that was 100% done on purpose. Okay.
Answer: for less or for free, users leave. This is the moat that never was, not a structural advantage built over years, but a head start that the rest of the industry spent 3 years methodically erasing. And the clock is running faster than most people realize.
That's also not totally true, saying that the rest of the industry, you caught the rest of the industry by surprise. Google was already fully locked with language models dating back as early as like 2018, right? I was hearing about transformers. I think we actually published one of our papers at NeurIPS the year that Transformers came out, and I saw a talk by Jeff Dean and Kunle Alakutin talking about how Transformer was the foundation of Google Translate the same time that the Transformer model was being published, right? And it kind of makes sense in some sense, right? Is that they invented this thing that was massively disruptive, and they didn't just like publish a paper about it and say, hey guys, go have some fun. They're doing like what Merle's doing, right? Is that we've invented diff, and we're not just saying, hey everybody, here's diff. Do you think our systems use diff? Right? Do you think that they've been using diff for 4 years and we have like a massive head start? And so the idea that OpenAI somehow took the market by storm by realizing the power of transformers, I think is not accurate. What I think is accurate is that they decided to lean into transformers as a basis of an entire global change rather than just an ad-centric use for natural language. I think that was like the fundamental shift that Google was, I think, hesitant about, or maybe not hesitant is the right word. I don't know that it had the same type of immediate monetary value that Google Translate has as using transformers. Does that make sense? Does this make sense, what I'm saying? You guys are being a little too quiet. You should argue with me more. And we need need some violent disagreement here. Or agreement or something. I think we need well, one of the people we banned, maybe I'll go down this rabbit hole just a little bit. I think many of you know that for those of you that are streamed, most of the audience doesn't do the streaming thing. Hopefully that'll change. But you'll be watching the VOD later after this. And for the most part, I really don't mind if people trash talk me at all, right? I kind of expect it, which is why I'm saying, like, why am I not getting like this violent disagreement on this or a huge amount of discussion? And I love that, right? Because that's going to level me up on the things that I'm missing, all this type of thing. But there was, and you know, to back up a little bit, I've been doing Nautica for 25 years. And I've like the volume of hate and other things. It's sort of a love-hate thing. Is the Nautica players, I think, have loved the game, but then they really hate when I make a change that hurts their class or their race, and some of them take it too far, right? They become so infatuated with the game that they kind of lose their ability to think rationally. And so some of them went really, really far, right? Like death threats. I mean, I don't know how many I've received in my life, but it's hundreds, right? A few of them got to the point to where it was so serious we actually had to have the police involved, right? Because they were like really taking it too far. I laugh about it, but I don't know if I was laughing about it now or back then. Anyway, so in my experience doing this type of thing, getting pushback and disagreement, totally normal. And even people calling me like ridiculous names, I'm actually totally fine with that. But some people take it to another level. A whole nother level. They make it their personal quest in life that they're just going to try to go after a single person. And, you know, this is not normal behavior. This is not just getting angry about something that somebody said. This is kind of like psychotic behavior. This is sociopathic behavior. And in running GTT, no, I know what I'm getting into, right? So I knew that there's going to be a couple outliers where we're going to have some people that are like this. Just like there were a couple in Nautica where they went too far and just like, okay, you this is not you just sharing that you don't like me and you're going to just say bad things. Like you're actually threatening to come to my house and with, you know, armed and stuff. Anyway, so in GDT, the entire time we've been running it, there haven't been any people like this. There's been some people that are kind of angry or whatever, but it's been pretty chill until recently. Very recently. And I laugh about it. I don't know that I should laugh about it, but I'm unfazable, you know, and I also am not being lackadaisical. So it's not that I'm not taking it seriously. It's just so common that it just doesn't really affect me. It will affect me when a big tech company wants diff to not exist, right? Like I'm more concerned about that and the bad things that might happen than just some sort of rando. But these parasocial behaviors, I think, can sometimes go too far. And for certain people in GDT, like some of you that are on Cyber, for example, we actually built a very tight relationship. Like we know each other by name and we talk privately, and there's like a very strong foundational relationship. But sometimes people, I think, become so enamored with this public figure that in their head, they kind of have worked out their life together with that person in some capacity. And I think that's kind of what happened with this person. And the problem is you never really know who it's going to be. And I also refuse to take the view in life that I'm going to be jaded. I'm not going to treat people poorly just because one person went off the rails. And so in some sense, I'm going to continue to greet people with open arms. The problem is that 1 in a million is going to take that as like, oh my gosh, they talk to me, and then they can play out the story in their head of like, this is going to be us together for forever, and we're going to have kids, and we're going to have, a house and a family. And I just like the next 50 years they've got fully fleshed out. And then when you don't respond, right, or you kind of are busy doing other things, that their personality can start to elevate and stuff. And at that point, you're kind of already cooked, right? There's even if it's complete silence, in many cases, it doesn't matter, because this person has already built up this imaginary narrative where they're going to be married to this. And you're like, I've thought about this quite a bit of how I can avoid these types of anomalous one-offs. And I think the only way to do it for sure is to just not treat anyone with kindness. And I can't do that. I can't become that person, right? Because in some sense, then I've lost. Like, I think, would Marcus Aurelius do this? No, I think that he would treat people kindly. And then as you get the random one-off, then you deal with that as an isolated incident or a very small number of incidents. So anyway, this is my long-winded way of saying that for the most part, everybody on GTT and that's following and working with us, they've been amazing. But we do have one outlier now that we actually had to ban and block and shut down every possible thing because it was getting so crazy. It was getting so off the rails that, yeah, it wasn't good. Thankfully, 99.999% of the world is not like that. But yeah, be careful. Just make sure that if people start getting too further along in your relationships with them that seem to be disproportionate with the amount of time that you've known them or something of that nature, this might be an early signal of like, wait, hold on here. What's actually going on? Anyway, okay, back to the video.
Sam Altman told his investors someone is going to lose a phenomenal amount of money. He wasn't wrong. The question is just who. OpenAI needs approximately $200 billion in annual revenue by 2030 to justify its current valuation.
Dream.
That's 15 times its current revenue, all while costs are accelerating. Competition is intensifying, scaling.
15 times their current revenue is achievable. The problem is that as they try to get more revenue, their costs are also disproportionately increasing. So, like he was saying before, every time they try to increase the scale, they will see a bump in the income or the revenue, but they see significantly more costs. So the actual amount of profit gets further and further into the red.
Laws are plateauing, and its most talented people are walking out the door. And then there are the lawsuits. Elon Musk, who contributed $38 million, roughly 60% of OpenAI's entire early seed funding, is suing the company he helped create. His argument is straight.
Like, I gotta tell you, I've learned a couple lessons in my life, being the ripe age of over 50. And one of the things that I've learned, which is a rule that I just will follow to the grave, is I do not burn bridges with PTMs, people that matter. I just won't do it, right? Like that doesn't mean I'll allow myself to be trampled on and this kind of thing, but it's part of the reason why I'm a stoic or follow the philosophy of stoicism is, if people treat me poorly, for the most part, it's just like, okay, well, that's not good, but I just move on. Like, I don't really retaliate. One, because if I did that, that's all that I would do with my life, for all the reasons. And I want to actually do meaningful things. But one of the things that's probably the craziest is Sam Altman is not Elon Musk. And whatever your view of Elon is, like, I don't think that Elon is a perfect guy, but the guy is incredibly intelligent and he has global influence. If you take him as an investor, no matter what you do, you should not burn a bridge with this guy. Like, either you don't work with him or you choose to work with him and you know that you're going to be beholden to Elon. You don't work with him and take his money and then like cut him out and then think everything's going to be hunky-dory, especially when he was a big proponent of the early view of OpenAI, right? This was the whole reason, as I understand it, that he had originally got involved. And so the misstep of burning a bridge with Elon in such a public and egregious way is, like, there are mistakes that you can make, and then there's like mistakes you cannot make. This is a mistake that they made that's like, I don't know how you fix this one, guys. You should have understood the bed that you're getting into before you get into that bed. At least this is how I think about these things.
Forward, he funded a non-profit dedicated to benefiting humanity and instead got a $500 billion for-profit corporation that enriched its founders and its biggest investor. The damages Musk is seeking range from $79 billion to $134 billion, a figure his legal team calculated by arguing he is entitled to a portion of OpenAI's current $500 billion valuation, given that his early funding and credibility were foundational to everything that followed. To put that,
the credibility part is so important, that prior to OpenAI becoming this huge thing, at least outside of the Valley, nobody knew who Sam Altman was, right? He's not some super famous professor or AI researcher or established founder, right? I mean, he had been involved in YC, but bad things happened, at least before they scrubbed the internet and changed the narrative there. So he's not like a major figure. He's not Jan LeCun, right? Like Jan LeCun going and raising $1 billion for his world model vision. This makes sense because he's Jan LeCun. What I'm trying to say is he's put in the time. He's put in the reps. He's established his reputation. And so Jan doesn't need Elon Musk for people to pay attention to him. Sam Altman was, again, outside of the Valley. Nobody knew really who he was, but everybody knows who Elon Musk is. And so if you get Elon Musk as an investor, you immediately get this incredible amount of clout. It's not even the money, right? Like, yes, $38 million in early stage, it's not even a drop for Elon, but for a small startup that has no other options, this is a huge amount of money. But more importantly, it's the number of doors that get opened immediately from that clout. And so I absolutely think that, like, for example, if OpenAI was not funded by Elon Musk in the early days, would OpenAI be at this juncture? I would argue there's probably a 0% chance that that would happen. So, and also them changing from being a not-for-profit to being for-profit, like, what is this ridiculousness? Has this ever happened before? Like, do you guys know any stories of another company that said is the Red Cross suddenly like a for-profit thing? Like, is NPR suddenly for profit? And I mean, it just changes the whole fundamental philosophy of the company. It's a very strange and dubious thing. And at least from my perspective, it seems like if it is legal, which I don't know exactly how that would be legal, but if it's legal, just the optics of it are so bad. Because I think in some ways what you're saying is, yeah, we really didn't care about money before. We just cared about the mission. And then it's like, oh, just kidding. We actually really, our primary focus is on the money. We were just kind of pretending. And you're going to burn a lot of goodwill and a lot of trust if you do that. Like, you should have just started as for profit if that was really your intention. And then things are going to play out differently. You're probably not going to get Elon Musk because he's backing you in the sense of you being not for profit, but maybe you get somebody else, right? So there's essentially like a number of missteps. And I think that this notion of having your cake and wanting to eat it too is a lot of where the struggles and the problems are coming up with OpenAI. It's greed, I think. Ultimately, what it really comes down to is just, I think, an overwhelming sense of greed. And people are not stupid, right? You may fool them temporarily, but over the long term, I think, yeah, they're gonna figure out what's what.
That in perspective, if Musk wins at the top of that range, the damages alone would nearly equal OpenAI's projected cumulative losses through 2029. The trial is scheduled for April the 27th, 2026. A verdict against OpenAI wouldn't just be a financial blow, it would be a court of law ruling on the record that the company broke the promises it was built on. OpenAI has called the lawsuit baseless and part of an ongoing pattern of harassment. But notably, that is the same characterization the company uses for almost every critical account of its behavior. Meanwhile, regulators in Washington and Brussels are circling, probing the Microsoft partnership for antitrust violations. Legal bills are climbing. Compliance costs are climbing. Every dollar spent on lawyers is a dollar that generates zero revenue. By most projections, at current burn rates, OpenAI's cash reserves will be critically strained by mid-2027. And then what? The most likely answer isn't a dramatic bankruptcy. It isn't a collapse that makes headlines. It's something quieter, and in some ways more sobering. It's an acquisition. Microsoft, already deeply integrated with OpenAI's infrastructure, already subsidizing its existence through cloud credits, is the natural buyer. For Microsoft, it would be an opportunity to absorb the most famous AI company in the world at a fraction of its peak valuation. OpenAI proved that scaling laws work. They also proved that the AI revolution has gone entirely industrial, that success in this space now requires not clever research alone, but acres of data centers, gigawatts of power, and the kind of capital reserves that only sovereign governments and the largest corporations on Earth can sustain. The startup era of AI may already be over, and
I also want to say that if you look at Microsoft's play, I think they funded or invested in multiple rounds, but it was one of the last ones where they gave them quite a bit of money for controlling stake in OpenAI. And when you have controlling stake in a company, and then you want to acquire that company, things become significantly easier, right? Because you gotta kind of think of it like, what does controlling stake mean? Well, part of that means that as a fiduciary, you're doing what's right for the company. And if OpenAI demonstrates themselves as not being solvent and not being able to sustain their overheads, then the proper fiduciary behavior, rather than going bankrupt, is to be acquired. And so if you're then inside of that company, you can make a very strong fiduciary argument of this is the right thing to do. And because you have arguably the strongest voice in the room, it can be very hard to resist against that. Like, for example, if Microsoft tried to do this from a non-controlling interest perspective, one could probably, in those board meetings, present an argument on why you shouldn't do it with Microsoft or all of these other things. You could essentially like sow a number of falsehoods, I think. But you can't really do that when Microsoft is actually in the room. The other thing that I think is quite brilliant is if the actual value of OpenAI is continuing to degrade. I'm not talking about the public perception or these fake valuations that are coming from VC firms, which have no basis for the actual valuation of the company. I'm talking about like how much somebody would actually pay to acquire this company. If that is continuing to devolve because the competition is getting more and more intense, I think that this creates essentially incredible opportunity for one, Microsoft to have the controlling interest and then essentially force what is often known as a hostile takeover without it actually being seen as like a hostile takeover, because they've kind of outplayed Sam Altman at his own game. Now, on the other hand, I think that what makes this a little confusing is, given the competition in the space and the fact that Anthropic is doing so well, what do you actually acquire if you get OpenAI, right? Like, oftentimes when you're doing these acquisitions, you're thinking about a bunch of things. You're thinking, one, do we get a product that is amazing? Maybe. Two, do you get technology that nobody else has? Probably not. Three, do you get a massive customer base that you didn't have without them? Maybe. And then four, do you get incredible people power that these people are one-offs from like a scientific perspective or in that domain that makes them basically worth that you likely couldn't get any other way. Now that a lot of the superheroes in OpenAI have kind of vacated the building, who do you get? I mean, if we're kind of being real for a second, the star power that Sam Altman had several years ago, I think that it has boomeranged in a way that has not been helpful for Altman at all. I think that it's, this is the thing about building trust and building up a public image, is these things take time. I think to do it in a way that doesn't end up resulting in self-sabotage, especially if you want to remain in the limelight for some period of time. It'll take years, it'll take decades. You'll do it the slow way, you'll do it the right way, and then by the time you have kind of the star power, it won't be, you'll be Markiplier, right? Or like, I think Markiplier potentially is a good example, is that he wasn't an overnight success. He's working in the influencer space for a very long period of time, and for all intents and purposes, basically, at least to my knowledge, he's just genuinely a very good human being. And so his rise is not met with a lot of, I'm sure there's people out there that don't like him just because he's famous and he's had so much success. But I think if you're being intellectually honest, I don't know what you could really hold on to that would make you think, oh, he's just like a terrible human being. On the other hand, if you look at the guy that's running OpenAI, and you know that part of the acquisition is, we'd get the star power. Like, for example, when Microsoft acquired, I can't remember the name of that company, but the founder's name is Mustafa something. He had quite a bit of star power. And for example, with Ilya Sukhsavar, or however you say his name, he also had star power. I mean, not fame in a general sense, but he had star power in the machine learning space. And so, for example, if Ilya was still there, then that could be very appealing because you would get that. But without these superhero AI talented people, knowing that a lot of the people at OpenAI, not all of them, like I know some people at OpenAI, and I don't know that necessarily I agree with their career choices, but they're not bad people. I think maybe they've let the greed take over momentarily. Some of them I know are doing it on purpose just to farm OpenAI. Like they know what they're getting into, they're aware of it, and they're like, look, I'm just here to farm them, and it's just going to be a short stint, and then I'm going to get out. I mean, everybody can do their own thing. I'm not going to be the ethics police, but I think other people will be. So anyway, when you consider all these factors and you look at the possibility of an acquisition from Microsoft, it raises some questions about like, what do you actually get? And I think that it's unclear to me, right? It's like, for example, if Microsoft could acquire Anthropic, I think that would be done yesterday, because Dario Amati has so much star power, I think, right now, and there's so many people that think that he's this amazing guy that you would probably pay enormous amounts of money just to have him for the clout, and they have the models, and they have the people. Like, it's a win. But Dario is a really smart guy, and he's probably going to not do that. He's going to try to do it himself. So anyway, it's a very interesting space that I think we're in now with OpenAI. But I wanted to first start out this stream looking at this before we get into episode 2 on the hype piece with Casey and Dimitri, just in case those of you on GTT didn't kind of understand all the economics, the manipulation, the power plays, just the general landscape that are things that those of us in the Valley that are like deeply integrated with AI, we kind of all know the games that are being played. But if you're not spending 16 hours a day of your life in this, like I am, some of this may be new information, maybe eye-opening.